The United Nations is racing to deliver food to the drought and famine-stricken citizens of Somalia. The United Nations World Food Programme begins airlifting the desperately needed nourishment to Mogadishu today. WFP Executive Director Josette Sheran says this is the first airlift since the UN declared a famine in 2 areas of Somalia last week. The UN says massive action is needed to save millions of people living in East Africa from starvation. Food aid is also slated to be airlifted to eastern Ethiopia and northern Kenya on Tuesday. At an emergency meeting in Rome on Monday, WFP Chief Jacques Diouf described the situation facing the region as catastrophic. Now, VOA's Paul Ndiho has more on the challenges facing international aid organizations in transporting food to the malnourished.
There is a life and death situation in Somalia. The WFP says the first shipments are on the way.
We do already have some plans to start airlifts of vital food that will help children and mothers into Mogadishu, where we have been operating for the last few years, where we have been providing both a combination of rations, monthly rations, as well as wet feeding. New arrivals who are coming in there are actually able to get what we call wet feeding, basically a ready-made meal when they come to a distribution site.
The World Food Programme is among the several groups that had been ordered out of the rebel-controlled areas. Aid agencies have been preparing to return, describing the situation in Somalia as increasingly desperate. But the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab militants who control the famine-stricken parts of the country say aid agencies may not return. This reverses a pledge from the militants to allow the workers to operate freely. WFP spokesperson Rene McGuffin says that WFP needs safe access to other parts of the country.
The real challenge is actually in southern Somalia, where, as you say, we have not been able to operate since 2010. And perhaps it's no surprise that as a result of this massive drought, one of the driest years on record in 60 years, combined with high food prices, combined with conflict and the lack of access by humanitarian organizations like WFP, that you have such a dire situation. I mean, really, the situation on the ground in southern Somalia is life or death.
Some 10 million people are affected by the famine and drought in a region dubbed as the Triangle of Death by the local media that straddles Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. The UN says it has a moral imperative to get back into areas from which it had been ordered out.
We are really trying our best to work inside Somalia so that people don't have to make this devastating, life-threatening trek into Kenya and Ethiopia. If we could aid, and I think we all know that, if we could aid the victims on the spot, prevent them from leaving their villages, we would not be in this terrible situation we are seeing now.
WFP is currently reaching out 1.5 million people in Somalia and says it's scaling up to reach an additional 2.2 million people in the previously inaccessible south part of the country. WFP is preparing to open up a number of new routes by land and air into the core of the famine zone to establish the necessary operating conditions, including those that will secure the safety of the humanitarian personnel.
Somalia is one of the most difficult, dangerous, risky places that we can work in the world. We've lost 14 staff since 2008 inside Somalia, but we are ready. We do have plans, but we do need safe access. And so we've been working through the UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Somalia, seeking that assurance that we will have safe access to the people, mostly children and mothers who are in desperate need.
Al-Shabaab accused the United Nations last week of exaggerating the severity of the drought gripping the south part of the country and politicizing the crisis. Well over 100,000 Somalis have fled since July, mainly to Kenya and Ethiopia. And hundreds of Somalis are arriving in Kenya and Ethiopia each day. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.